Hey everybody, it's Rob, Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. I'm very excited today. We have a good guest on, Brian Bastinelli, Battalion Chief from the Harrisburg Bureau of Fire. You may have seen some of his stuff on social media, especially his YouTube channel, with some of the fires that he's taken in and some of the lessons that he's shared with that. So with that being said, Brian, welcome to the podcast and thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk about going to fires and stuff. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. So just for those who are out there, before we dive into it, kind of just talk a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, for those who don't know you or maybe aren't familiar.
So I originally was raised in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, in a small town, and eventually ended up in Nazareth. Went to high school there. Started firefighting in Bushkill Township, which is just a little rural area. There was a lot of good dudes there, and they really kind of helped keep that fire going forward that I was interested in. I moved down to York, Pennsylvania to go to college, volunteered down there, and then started taking tests and was hired by the Harrisburg Bureau of Fire, and I've been there ever since for 29 years now. That's the short version of it. But I do owe a lot of it to Johnny and Roy, if I'm being 100% honest.
Hell yeah.
They that was an everyday watch for me, and they made a huge impact on my life. So I really have to give most of the credit to them and my parents for allowing me to, be all geeked out about fire trucks and stuff. So.
Brian, you've been in the fire service for a little over 32 years, both volunteer and career. Like, take me back to those early days, between Bushkill and Township and then down in York. What drew you into the fire service? And I think you just kind of answered it. And what kept you hooked? I mean, you said you referenced Johnny and Roy in emergency, but like, what?
Yeah.
What were the other things that kind of got you into it?
So, growing up, I grew up. Well, I didn't grow up for the first couple years of my life. I lived in a small town called Martins Creek, which is on the very east end of Pennsylvania, little tiny town. And we lived in this big half a double house with Jimmy and Bessie Palmieri. And if you're from the eastern area, you know who the Palmieris are. They're a huge family. They've done a lot of things. But Jimmy was heavily involved in the Lower Mount Bethel ambulance, and I would go over to their house all the time and look at the Plectron and listen to that going off. And then he would take me down to see the old Cadillac ambulances. And that really, that's where it started. My parents bought me a little pedal car that I drove around in, and I had, fire trucks, and that's what I played with it. And everybody kind of just supported that. So it was always there. And then as I got a little bit older, Johnny and Roy came on the scene. And like I said, every day after school, it was on at 4 o'clock. I would get all my matchboxes out. I would set it up, and I would play along with them. And then as a kid growing up, we would go out and stage these little rescue incidents in the neighborhood. And at any given time, I would have kids wrapped up in some crazy situation. And then we would, we had our little yellow raincoats, and we made all of these different, like we had a tackle box, and we made an ambulance out of the wagon. And that's just what we did for fun. And so it was a huge part of my life. And then I started working at the hospital when I was in high school as a transporter. And then I was like, you know what? I originally wanted to go to school for nursing, and I was working in the hospital. I had done some ride-alongs on the ambulance, and I was thinking about being a paramedic. And I eventually became an EMT in my senior year of high school, and then I started volunteering for the ambulance. And they just started working on me to join the fire department. My parents weren't too keen on the idea at the time. So when I turned 18, I kind of backdoored it and applied myself, and went to fire school and told them about it afterwards. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then when I went to York, Pennsylvania for college, just adjacent to the York College campus is this little firehouse called Grantley, and it's not a super busy department. It's a single engine, but it's been a career department since 1926, and the career guys that work there were just absolutely fantastic mentors and friends, and they cultivated these smart ass college kids that would come in wanting, to change everything, and we didn't run a ton of calls, but we had all that energy, and they really helped us direct that energy. And they also taught me that a career in the fire service was viable. And up until that point, I hadn't really considered it in that way. It was just something that I did while I was doing the other things that I wanted to do. And then I started taking the tests, and then I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I think this is what I could do for the rest of my life. And I was lucky enough to get picked up by Harrisburg, and the rest is kind of history.
Now, you spent 16 years as a firefighter before promoting in Harrisburg. What were some of the habits, like attitudes or lessons from that time that influenced the way you lead today?
Well, I spent about 8 years on the engine, and then 8 years on the truck, and I think that was really good for me experience-wise to understand. I love truck work, and I'm not gonna diss the engine, but I love truck work. But I really also think that you have to understand the engine company and be good at that job before you can excel as a truck firefighter. So that's why I kind of spent that time where I did. I was lucky. I worked with some really good dudes, and they just passed on what they knew, and they did it in a way that the expectation was that you were going to be good at your job, and our department kind of forces that too, because it's a small department and we don't have the luxury of calling tons of help, and so you have to develop those habits early on. So I think the guys really tried to instill that. Like, I remember when I was training to be a truck operator, they would make me pull the truck out and set the outriggers, and then I would want to fly it, and they're like, no, that's not how this works. Put it away and do it again. And until you can get the basics of getting the truck set up right, don't even think that it has a ladder on it, because you're not good enough yet to get there. And so that's what we did over and over and over again on those basic things. And it just kind of instilled to me how important that those things are. If you're not excellent at the basics, or constantly working to improve the basics, it doesn't matter what else we do, because then we become part of the problem, and we can never be part of the problem. We always have to be part of the solution. And I think that was probably the most important thing that I picked up, is that you have to have that work ethic and want to be as good as you can. And now I'm not going to tell a fake story. I went through the same things that everybody else does. Like, I had times in my career when I was not as into showing up and doing the best job that I could. I was disillusioned for whatever reason that I thought was important at the time. And at some point I said, I had a couple years like that, and I was just like, this isn't who I want to be. That's not who I am. And I'm not going to allow that to continue to be who I am. And I kind of switched it up. And that was about the time that I started testing for promotion.
Wow. There's a lot. There's just so much to unpack there. I want to kind of circle back to you talking about the basics and being good at the basics, because I think that, and just a sidebar, in the fire service today, people get plagued in training by wanting to have these complicated drills, but the basics are like, our work is not rocket science. And there's can you kind of just speak on that a little bit more about where people maybe have the pitfalls? Because you have to be good at like stretching a line, getting your mask on, forcing that door, knowing your building construction, where the fire is going out. Can you just kind of talk on that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. I think it's, you know, we complicate a lot of the job. We make it more challenging than it needs to be sometimes. And I think we do it in the name of wanting to be prepared and be really good at our jobs. Like, I get all of that. However, if we're adding layers of complexity onto an operation and we're not able to deploy those basics in an effective way, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. And I think because by and large we are successful in what we do, we feel like we're really good at those basics. And I think sometimes we unintentionally lose sight of the work that needs to be put in to keep that polished. And you know, I heard somebody say this in a different conversation, and I think it kind of applies here a little bit. You know, you can be the tip of the spear, but that doesn't mean that the tip is sharp, and that's your responsibility. You have to keep that tip as sharp as you can. Otherwise, after going to call after call after call, it's going to get dull, and it gets dull by that complacency that gets built in by success. And you know, so you're going to be successful until one day and you're not, and then you're going to be like, wow, what the hell just happened? Well, you know, when you kind of forensically go back and look at it, you're like, oh yeah, now I see it. Like, we've been creeping over here for quite a while because we allow our ego to make us feel comfortable that we're doing the best we can, and in reality it's perishable. It's all perishable.
Yeah, 100%. In thinking back in your career, Brian, is there a spot in particular where you can kind of see that, you know, like the young firefighter drifted off into that complacency realm where and like that? I don't know if it's, you know, I know it's kind of on the fly here, but like that spot that brought you back to center. You know, maybe it was a close call or just something didn't go out that way that you wanted it to get you back to that center where because I think that's something everybody struggles with.
Well, I'll be 100% honest on how it happened to me. It was Modern Warfare, the video game, right? Like, we had, and I'll tell you how we got here. We had a 10-foot screen in our training room, and we would project Modern Warfare up on there. And we would come in and we played a lot of Modern Warfare at night, and it became a little bit of a priority. Our whole firehouse was kind of really into it. We'd get our stuff out on the floor, and then we'd go set up, and then, you know, we would find ourselves at, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning still back there playing Modern Warfare, and it became a priority for a while. And I think that is just representative of a lot of things for various guys, right? Whatever your thing is, that whether it's a side business or you know, whatever the thing is. Right now it's just doom scrolling is enough to keep you from doing what you're supposed to be doing. But so we did that for a while, and it was kind of cool for the brotherhood and the camaraderie and stuff like that, but we weren't really focused on what we were there to do. And I don't want to make it sound worse than it was, but it had an effect, right? Like, we were still doing our job. We were still doing training that we were supposed to do at the department. Those extra things that really keep you sharp kind of started to go to the wayside a little bit. And I just started feeling like I wasn't focused the way I should have been. I don't know that there's one specific incident that really like scared it out of me or was like, oh man, that was close. I mean, we had some close calls, and we had some fires where, you know, we were doing some cowboy stuff, I feel like, and we knew we were kind of running that that edge, but I don't know that there's one that I can say that was the moment. Right. I think it was just a general, I just started to kind of snap out of it and say, hey, you need to really pay attention to this job. This job is can get you. I think some of those more serious lessons kind of happened later. Things that I could speak to that happened later in my career that I was like, okay, this is why, because now I am doing what I should be doing, and this stuff is still happening. So I think that's the best way that I can answer that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I want to just like kind of hit on too is that that promotion the promotion mindset shift. So you moved from that back step to lieutenant, and like I just lost I got my questions here. So what was some of the like mindset changes that started to change as you moved up in promotion?
Well, it was not as easy to I don't think it was as easy to just go in and do the job and look at it as like, man, that was badass. That was a great fire, right? Like there's some level of responsibility now where I am not only responsible for what I do, I'm responsible for the lives of other people and directing this company. And it's serious business. Now, I have stepped from me going to a job that I love and pushing the limit and, because it was fun and I love doing that, to saying, okay, hey, I got to start to think a little bit differently here because these guys all have to go home at the end of the day. And so I think that was the first thing, was starting to think like, okay, I have a higher level of responsibility. What does that mean? And how can I make sure that I'm hitting the marks that I'm supposed to? I started looking at people that I liked working for, and I looked at people that I didn't like working for. And I was like, okay, I don't want to emulate the wrong things here. So who are the people that can be good mentors to me, even if they don't understand that they're being a mentor to me? And who are the people who are going to mentor me in a way that is completely unconventional, in that I am going to watch everything you do, and then I am going to try my hardest to never do any of it. And I think that was important. And then I think learning, where do I fit in the operation? Like, what's my role? Before, I was very task fixated. I would go do my task. I would do it as good as I could, and then I would get another task, and I would do that. Where the company officer, I felt like I need to understand more of what's going on so that I'm driving this company in a way that helps the incident progress the way we want it to, versus just going out and saying, hey, go cut this roof, or hey, go do this search, or whatever. Like there was more to it than that. So I think I had to identify what those things were and how I could manipulate them in a way that was beneficial not only to my crew, but to the overall objectives of the incident and accomplishing what we were there to do.
What did that process look like? Because I mean, that's when I promoted to lieutenant, I had a very similar, like it was like a little wand came out and bopped me on the head, and I realized this responsibility was there, and trying to understand that, taking the company forward, the mission, and making the right moves. Like, what was that process like as you were kind of moving through that?
So, no disrespect to our department, but at the time, the department didn't really help you with that, right? Like, So yesterday you were riding the truck, and today you're the lieutenant, and good luck. You'll be fine, right? Like, what could go wrong? And and that was it. So,
and how many places does that happen across the country still?
Sure,
right?
Absolutely. And it just is the way we did business, and it was left up to me to try and figure out what that process was going to be. and I didn't know. So it was messy, I think, at times, because not only was I learning leadership, like personnel leadership, but I was learning where I fit in the fireground. And, I'm sure that I made plenty of mistakes. I'm sure that there's some people who would tell you that I made a lot of mistakes, and that's fine, because that's what happens. That's what you're going to do. If you've never done something before, that's just part of the process. And so I've been always kind of introspective, so I think that I just had to kind of talk to people. I had some people that I felt like I was able to talk to and get some good feedback, and then just keep my ear to the ground and hear, what's the scuttlebutt on that last incident or whatever. So, taking that in to try and not just, because if I just stayed in my own silo and just evaluated it myself, I could say, oh yeah, that was a pretty good job, and everybody else is saying, oh man, that was terrible. So I think you have to balance that self introspection and what other people are saying, and then you have to consider those sources, right? Like I don't sit at home and worry about what everybody else is saying about my performance. I think that there is a little bit of space for that. You have to have space for that to understand how other people are perceiving what you do. But at the same time, I'm probably my own worst critic. So I would look at my performance as best as I could and kind of go back and rethink it and kind of walk it through. It wasn't until probably my second year as a lieutenant that helmet cams kind of became a thing. And then I started wearing the helmet cam and reviewing the real incident, right? Because you have that kind of unintended revisionist history that goes on in your mind where the camera kind of tells it exactly the way it is. And I feel like it was at that point that I really started to improve in what I was doing, because I could see it in real time and say, what the hell were you thinking? Or, why did you do that? And kind of reconsider those things. So for me, it was just really a lot of self introspection, looking back, kind of post visualizing what I did and walking myself through it and saying, hey, what was the outcome of that? Was it good? Was it bad? And it was trial and error, honestly. And like I said, I had some good people around me that gave me the feedback that I wanted, and I think that was helpful.
Who are you comfortable? Like, who were some of the mentors that like helped you in those years that you looked up to as a lieutenant? Because I think that like there's so many people I think of that just were phenomenal for me to help me on the path, and I imagine you had some pretty big shoes there that were stepping up to the plate, whether they realized it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I would start by saying all of the guys that were career firefighters at Grantley, I was still volunteering there, and I talked to them. They had become really good friends, so they were good guys to run things past, especially in the fireground stuff, because they had a lot of experience in the world. And so that like Mike Garland and Rick Merck, Barry Emig, like these were just guys that really showed us as young kids the way. They calmed us down, they pointed us in the right direction, they tried to mentor us as best as they could. So as I started to move up in the fire service, I maintained that relationship, and I did run a lot of stuff off of them and got a ton of good feedback. From my department, my partner Brad Myers on the truck has always been somebody that I've bounced stuff off of, and we had a great time on the truck together. Dave Halseal was another guy that was instrumental in my love of fire service history and that kind of stuff. So those were good guys. As far as my officers, Doug Bear was the lieutenant on Squad 8. He's kind of a legendary lieutenant in our department. And, we had a lot of conversations, and we still talk to this day. Captain Iceman was my captain right before I got promoted. And, he started to give me, as a truck chauffeur, he started to give me leeway. Like, on arrival, he would say, if I don't say anything, it's on you. Like, you make the decisions, you do the setups, you do, all of that kind of stuff. And that was really cool because, I think I proved myself enough to him where he allowed me to make those decisions. And then we would talk about it, and I would certainly get feedback if I didn't do what was right. But and then I think Chief Horst was a great guy. I worked with him as a fireman. I mostly worked overtime with him as a officer when I was on overtime or something. But he has always been somebody who I have discussed the fire service with and has, mentored me, and I think that his opinions I hold pretty at a high level. And Chief Sevison would be the other one that I think that unfortunately he moved on to work at Pima and stuff, which was great for him. But I really enjoyed working for him. His expectations were very, very high, and he had a really good way of letting you know that you were not meeting them. But he built you up, and he mentored you, and he gave me a lot of opportunities. So I think those are the some of the really big ones. And there's a lot of firemen who I still talked with and stuff. But as far as officers in that time of my transition into being a lieutenant, I think those were a lot of the big ones.
What was the transition like from lieutenant to captain? Was there much of a difference in the department? Is it a I mean, I know obviously it's another rank up, but like, what are the responsibilities? Like, did you have a transition period in that as well?
Yeah, so it was a little complicated because our department doesn't have like a captain of a house. There's a captain at ladder 2, so all 4 captains are at ladder 2. So the position of captain in and of itself is a lot like being a lieutenant, because there's not a lot of additional leadership responsibility on the day-to-day when you're acting in the role as captain. That being said, you are the battalion chief. You're the fill-in for the battalion chief when the battalion chief's off. So you bump up to acting battalion chief. So you go from being lieutenant to captain to acting battalion chief, and that can happen really quickly. When I was just on vacation, my newly promoted captain, the week after he went from lieutenant to 1 week as a captain, and then I was off for a month and a half, so he went to acting battalion chief. So
talk about like jumping into the frying pan there.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did a great job. And we talked about it prior to my leaving. I gave him the best advice that I could, and he knew it was coming, and he prepared for it, and he did a really good job. But I think going back to that, I had a little bit of experience when I was a lieutenant. You could double act. So I did some time as the acting battalion chief as a lieutenant, and that's the first time. Our city is split in half by, there's the hill and the downtown, and there's like a valley in between. So there's this big bridge called the State Street Bridge that runs from the hill to downtown, and at the west end of the bridge is the state capitol. So the firehouse is kind of at the east end of the bridge. So that first time that you get into the battalion chief's car and you head out across the bridge and you can see the entire city and the state capitol and stuff, yeah, I mean, you're just like, what did I get myself into? Like, oh, it's just very lonely, right? Like
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
gone your whole career with a bunch of dudes on a truck acting like 12-year-olds, and it's fun, and you're talking about stuff, and you're driving around and you're spotting things that, like, oh, look at that building, or, all of this different stuff that you're doing. And then all of a sudden they give you all of the responsibility, and you're alone, and you don't have anybody to talk that stuff out with anymore.
I was
And
just gonna say, like, there's a little bit of, not to cut you off. There's like when you're an officer in the seat and you have your crew with you, that's like a safety blanket of sorts, because
Yeah.
you're all going back and forth, like, hey, like this, like, what hydrants here. Oh, I remember the wires are on this side of this, whatever. Like,
Right.
stuff's coming back and forth, and there's a conversation flowing. When you're in that Chief's car, man, especially if you're by yourself and you don't have a chauffeur, like, it is a lonely drive.
It is absolutely. And you don't have the benefit of getting all of the information like you do. Like, I try not to drive emergency and, read my MDT at the same time. Like, that's not a good habit to get into, because eventually it's going to lead to problems. And so we started a policy on my shift where the second due company officer is responsible for reading the notes on the MDT, and then if there's something that's in there that's important, they'll call it out on the radio, which has worked really well for us, because otherwise I don't necessarily get to see that. But yeah, so yeah, it gets lonely. It gets lonely pretty quick, and you're just like, all right, here we go. I hope this works.
Yeah.
You know,
So
you know.
So let's roll into this command mindset at a fire. You're arriving as a first in battalion chief at a working fire. What's running through your mind in those first 30 seconds?
So the biggest thing for me, we work really hard on our guys understanding their jobs and understanding how to deploy at an incident, and how they're, what their roles and responsibilities are, what the arrival order is, and what that means for how they deploy. So that has done a lot for us. And, I'm sure a lot of people do that, but we work really hard on making sure that that's pretty tight. And what that allows me to do is spend a lot more time evaluating the incident. And if we need to change that, I can call that out and say, or whoever the first arriving officer is can call it out and make adjustments to our plan. But we follow the plan. And when I get there, I want to, as quickly as possible, understand what is the problem. And not in a way like, well, the problem is the building's on fire. Yes, it can be that simple. But, like, really, what is the problem? Where is the fire? At what level of the building is the fire on? Is anything impeding us in being able to carry out our plan? Are there any changes to our plan that we have to make right now and let everybody know about? And I just want to understand, how far out of the bottle is this genie? And what do we need to do to quickly try and get it under control? And then, so I'll do that, try and talk to people, a responsible party or a resident or whatever, if they're there, and get some additional information, do a bit of a size up as far as any potential victims that are known. And then I want to get the 360 done. So I want to do that as quickly as possible, but at the same time, I want to do it in a way that is slow enough that I'm actually seeing. My biggest fear is that I'm going to look, but I'm not actually going to see something. And then later on, I go back and watch the video and be like, man, I should have seen XYZ thing. Yeah. And, so there's that. I want to get there quickly, get it sized up as quickly as possible, but I don't want to exchange speed or thoroughness for speed. So that's my biggest priority is what's on fire, where's it at, and how does it affect our standard operating procedures, or does it? And do we have to make any initial changes to that? And then, from there, it's just going to get deeper into that size up.
Right.
Um,
Brian, how do like so you're I'm going to use the term blessed, hashtag blessed. But you're working in the city of Harrisburg. You see a share of fire load. You have a good working, at least from the outside looking in. How do you have tips for fire officers, whether they be line officers or chiefs, who don't see the work, to break like tunnel vision and to kind of get into that size up mode of what you just talked about? What's the problem? What level is this incident on? Anything impeding us? Changes to the plan? Like how far? I love that term. How far is the genie out of the bottle?
right. I think you have to start like really basic. So the first thing is you have to understand that this is what you have wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
it's like this is the moment. Like this is what it's all about, and you've prepared for this, and if you're doing the work, you have to convince yourself that you're ready for it, right? Like, okay, I can do this. I've done this. I've gone to fires. And, I don't like people who say things like it's not your emergency, it's their emergency. Like, no, it's absolutely, like, we swore an oath that took the burden of this emergency onto our shoulders. It is 100% our problem, and we are there to make as an effective and efficient change to this situation as possible. So, but you can't let that drive you. And I think you have to start by making yourself comfortable in this moment. So when you look at the incident, what are the things that can make the incident go bad? Well, there's the fire behavior, the building construction, the condition of the building, the occupancy, whatever is happening inside of that building, hoarding, or, some dude is breaking down his motorcycle engine in the living room. You have no idea what's going on inside of that building. So that can affect it. The weather can affect it. And then the next thing I think is us. We can affect it. So what I don't want to do is worry about us in this moment. So it starts way before the incident in making yourself comfortable. And the way you make yourself comfortable is knowing the people that you work with, knowing what their capabilities are, and then training together so that these are people that you want to go to this battle with. And if you build those relationships and you build those skill sets, then you can say, yeah, I don't want to go to a fire with anybody else but these guys.
Right.
And I think that's the number one thing. So the more comfortable you can make yourself in the environment, the less stress you're going to have in that moment. And then, that's going to continue on. The same concept is going to continue on to fire behavior and building construction. And if you understand the types of buildings you're going to fires in and how the fire behaves in them and what all of the potential problems are, it becomes easier for you to identify those things and say, oh, I saw this before, or I know what's going to happen here, or I think I know what's going to happen here. And it's just about making yourself comfortable in those moments. I feel like the more comfortable you are, the more your systems work and the more you're going to be open to seeing and stuff. But if you're stressed going into that, then it's going to help create tunnel vision. It's going to help create, fixation on things that are unnecessary for you to be fixated on. So I think a lot of it is that mental game that starts, well before an incident even comes in. And if you're not doing that, then yeah, of course it's going to be stressful. You're going to a building on fire. There could be people trapped. Like, that's stressful. And it's stressful even if you are prepared as you can be. But I think that's, making sure you know your crews and what they're capable of, who excels at what, and then understanding the environment. And by that, I mean the city, the residents, and the layout of the buildings, the complexity of the neighborhoods, the water system, the street sizes, access, all of that stuff. That's all stuff that happens before the fire. And you want to mitigate all of that stuff out so that when the fire is there, you're comfortable with those things. And then you can say, okay, I'm here. I know my guys are going to do what they're supposed to do. What's the problem? And how do we do what we do in a way that's going to best create the best outcome for this? And so that's the biggest thing, I think, first of all, is, take the time to get all of that stuff in order. And it takes so much stress off of, I don't want to see people's houses burned down. I don't want my guys to be in danger, in really dangerous situations. But let's be honest, we love going to fires. I want to go to fires, and I want to do it the best way we can. So if I can do all of that stuff ahead of time, and this is a weird way to say it, but like you can be in the moment. You can, I don't want to say enjoy the fire, but you get there and you have crews that are deploying, you're hitting all your marks. Like, it's a beautiful thing. But that work comes, if you expect that you're going to just shit it out at the time that the incident is happening, you've already lost the battle. So
I like that you also talked about, you said this briefly, but I think it's such a huge point, mental preparation, right? Like, and going through that, because I have spent the majority of my career either watching videos like you post on YouTube, or other people's videos, and like either muting the sound and running trying to run the incident, in my head like I would if I was there,
right.
Or just mentally preparing myself like, all right, I'm arriving on scene and I have a house that's fully involved with 2 exposures going. Like, how does my playbook facilitate this incident in the Fairview Fire District where I work, kind of stuff. And I think sometimes we don't, unless we don't talk about it, but it's not like that's a skill set all in of itself.
Sure. And I think guys don't talk about it because it gets into the neighborhood of, perceived weakness, right? Like, if I'm not the strong guy that a firefighter is supposed to be, or whatever. No, like, so when I leave, well, first of all, I think that I wish somebody would study this. I keep talking about it, but I don't really know like how it's the right way to study this particular incident. So maybe somebody will do an EFO paper on it or something. But the closer the incident is to the firehouse, the crazier it is. And I think that a lot of times, that comes down to that mental preparedness game, right? Like, everybody has a process. You get in the rig, you put your gear on, you sit down, you take some deep breath, you get yourself under control. Cause we get this adrenaline dump. Like, we're eating dinner, boom, structure fire. Okay. Adrenaline dumps. Well, adrenaline is there in your system. It's fight or flight, right? Like, you want it to, it's designed to keep a saber-toothed tiger from killing you. So like so it's an immediate response, but we don't have an immediate response. We get on the rig,
right,
and then we wait. And it's like, it's like people in an elevator, like they're talking, somebody gets in and it's quiet. And then you're like, okay, like, and now redump that adrenaline and go to work. Like, it creates problems. And when you don't get on the rig and go through your process and get yourself settled in the way that you need to, then you're still working on that crazy adrenaline dump. And it's not, and it makes you do, dumb stuff.
Yeah.
For me, I get in the car and, I like to think that I'm comfortable going to fires, but I have the dash cam going in the car, and I hear myself clearing my throat like 50,000 times on the way to a call. That's nerves, right? Like, I didn't recognize that I did that until I watched the video back, and I was like, man, I clear my throat a lot, right? Like, but it's just part of the process. I like to get my breathing under control. because while I may be a little nervous on a particular, you get there and half the block is on fire. It is what it is, right? Like it's a big event, but I don't want you to think that I think it's a big event. I want you to think that I'm just going to do what I do. So I got to take that moment and kind of calm myself down, and then say what I want to say on the radio. And sometimes it's better than other times, but if you're not intentional about that, then it's going to sound sometimes like you're having a stroke on the radio, and or you're never going to get yourself under control. Like, we are professionals, we should act like it, and we shouldn't be excited, and that gets into that whole expecting fire. And Andy Frederick said, about the garbage man, like he doesn't turn the corner and freak out because there's garbage. He just turns the corner and goes and picks up garbage. Like, that's what we should do. Like, you tested, you drove your family crazy all your life, right? You wanted to be a fireman. You did fire, right? So now you go to classes, and it's volunteer or career, whatever. You get to the point where you're a fireman, and you go to the firehouse. They tell you it's a structure fire. You're responding lights and sirens to go to this fire. They're giving you additional information. You can see it in the sky. Why should you be surprised when you get there and the building's on fire? By this time, you should have a handle on that. So, but we see a lot of people who are never able to really rein that in. And I think experience and time does that, but you have to be, you can be in the fire service for a really long time and not capitalize on the experience that you got. So I call those people first time every time, right? So it's like, and you don't want to be that, but you have to be intentional about how to not let that stuff control you. And one of the things I think is interesting is we lose sight a lot, I think, that we're human beings. And this is most prevalent, I think, when we witness bad stuff happening. We don't typically witness the incident. Outside of a fire, it's still ongoing, right? But we don't see the kid get hit by a car. We don't see somebody get shot. We don't see any of those things. We get there, it's already happened, and we can roll up and be like, wow, that really sucks. That's too bad for them. Let's go do our job and whatever. But when that stuff happens, when we're present, we still have the reaction of a human being seeing some terrible stuff. So we have to be able to manage that too. And that's, I made that mistake when I was really young riding the ambulance. They gave me a portable radio, which was a terrible idea. And I witnessed a car accident, like a really serious car accident happened in front of me. And I wish I had the audio from me calling that in, because it was a shit show. Like, I just vomited into the radio. But I can look back at it now and laugh about it. And, of course it was embarrassing, but I'm not meant to see really bad. We have a reaction to that. So I think that that's important to recognize that in those moments, you have to let that play out and then get a hold of it. But if you don't release that, it's going to come out in your communications or your stress level. It's going to stay there. So there's a video, it was in Chicago. There was a guy on a first arriving company, and they had I don't know, a ridiculous amount of people hanging out the windows of this apartment building fire. And he's on the scene, and he's like, oh, holy shit. He says that on the radio.
Right.
And I was like, bro, I get it. I feel you. I totally understand that. I try to arrive on the scene and just take it in for a second and be like, God damn, that's really burning. Or, you know what I mean? There's sometimes you get there and you're just like, wow, this is crazy. I allow myself to have that reaction, because if I don't, that emotion, that level of stress stays inside of my body and bounces all around, and then it drives the rest of your stuff to do. So you have to look at it, acknowledge it, let it have its moment, and be like, okay, we're about to get our asses kicked here.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, let's go do it. Now we got to go do it. But if I don't get that out, does that make sense? Like you got to let it out.
I think a lot of times, Brian, like there's been incidents in my life where I've had to dial 911, and it like when I hit that number on my phone and I press send and it says emergency call, I get a moment of panic because whatever's going on, I'm reporting, and I'm like, like now I'm a deputy fire chief.
You're just Rob.
Right.
You're just Rob.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's it makes it makes sense 100%. Like I totally agree with you, man.
Yeah, and so bringing that back to your original question in this area, I think you have to acknowledge that whether you want this stuff to happen or not, it's happening. It's biological. It's physiological. It's going to happen. So you can work against it, or you can work to understand it, and then it's a little different for each person, but you got to put the time into working through it, allowing it to have its moment, and then you can go on and do a good job. But
yeah,
it's like the earth having an earthquake, right? Like eventually that pressure just builds up, and then it breaks. And we can't afford to have that happen. So we got to find ways to let that out. So we can avoid that.
Yeah. You post videos of working incidents on YouTube. And I think you've kind of hit on some of this already, but how has filming and reviewing these moments shaped your decision making and your growth as a fire officer?
Well, it shows me the truth. Right? Like my brain and everybody's brain likes to tell the story in a very romantic way. We were there doing it, and it was incredible, right? But the video shows me the truth, and it's the good, the bad, the ugly, and I look at football as a it's kind of parallel. It's very different, obviously, from what we do, but it's a little parallel. It's a team. Yeah. They're trying to. They have an opponent, and they're trying to overcome that opponent. They have to be strategic and tactical about it and whatever. And, a lot of people hate on NFL players because they make it easy. But they're just like, oh, they're overpaid. But these dudes are putting in a level of effort. Imagine if we put in the level of effort that they put in, right, how good we would be at our job, right? And what's one of the biggest things that they do? They sit down, they have $1 million theaters that they sit down and watch game film in. Right. And they break it down, and they're willing to look at that performance and be like, yeah, that was on me. I didn't do so good today. So for me, seeing that reality, developing that understanding that not everything that I remember from the fire is exactly how it happened was pretty important. And I started to learn other things by watching these videos. Auditory exclusion is a great example. My chief at the time, Chief Bradford, would always ask me, hey, was the fire alarm going off? And I would come out and be like, no, there's no fire alarm going off. And then we would go back and watch the video. And then I can remember this one apartment fire specifically. There was a 12-inch bell on every floor, and they were all ringing. And I told them, no, the fire alarm wasn't going off. But it makes sense. I don't need to know that. There's fire coming out of the building. They called me there for a fire. Yep, it's a fire. So my brain is buffering things that it doesn't need to deal with because we already know there's a fire. So when I started to really understand that, that's when I started to understand that there were gaps in what I thought I knew about what had happened. And so then I was like, okay, I need to watch this closer. It's an opportunity to see exactly where I'm making the mistakes that I need to correct, or where we ran into friction points as a company or on the whole incident. And if you're willing to open yourself up to being critical like that of your performance, you can make some really good strides in improvement. I feel like.
What are some of the improvements that you've made in decision making and like just overall in the confidence on the fireground? Because I feel like there's like I try to record everything, much to the dismay of my wife sometimes. But like, you know, there's a like what have you taken away from that when it comes to your own footage? You know.
So I think there's several different categories. I think number one is what I thought my understanding of the incident was versus what it really was. I think did our tactics work in the way we wanted them to, and are the companies engaging? Are they engaging the way I believe they will, or you know, I'm not sure. You know, are we hitting our marks the way we should? Like, and then myself, you know, where was I at mentally, and like, was I hitting my marks as I should as the incident commander? Was I seeing the things I should have? Was I communicating the way I should have been? You know, there's a lot of times, and this is a whole other conversation, whether I should be out there in the mix or sitting in a car or whatever. But, you know, my department, the way we do it is I'm out there at the fireground, and there are some challenges with that. And one of the things is watching myself perform when I'm getting overrun by questions and communications and people arriving and that kind of stuff, and trying to come up with ways for me to make that to work through that and make that process more efficient and effective for not only me but for the people. Like, I hate watching a video back and then hearing somebody call me 3 or 4 times. That's super frustrating. For them, obviously, and for me, because it could be something very important. So I try to look at all of that stuff and just evaluate, did we identify and react to the problem in the most efficient and effective way we could? You know, from me personally to the company level to the whole operation.
Yeah. You know, and a little plug here for American Trademark. You have one of the case commanders. How does that, because it was one of the first things, I know the product because I have it in my car. I've used it a couple times, and it's one of the things that I've noticed in your videos. You are very good at giving directions to police officers and being like, hey, it's going to look like a rifle case. Come bring that up to me. Yeah. Like, and a lot of people forget that, because you said before, like, hey, should I sit in the car? We're out front. But it essentially, you might not be able to get in Harrisburg, your car up to the scene anyway.
Correct.
So to me, it's a way of bringing your car in front of the building in a portable way. How important is setting that up? Because I know this isn't like the sexy stuff that people want to sometimes think about as a battalion chief. You know, they probably have this, like, you know, bull from Backdraft. You're, you know, get in there and like, you know, but really, like, how does that roll into your operations?
So it does a couple of things. I have to go back a little bit further, but I'm going to say one thing first. It helps to anchor me, because it gives me a place to be. Because if I don't have that, then I can wander and drift around the scene based on what's going on. So it does kind of anchor me to the front, or I try to put it in a, you know, it's not the easiest thing to do, but I try to make the decision to put it in a spot where I'm close enough, but at the same time I'm not standing next to the engine that's pumping the fire, or, you know, whatever, just to be try and give me some level of serenity in the middle of all of this noise and chaos. We just had a fire not too long ago where I moved it like 3 times, and finally I told the group of guys, I was like, I'm moving down the street, you're staying here. Dude, stop following me. I need to be alone, right? Like, the staging area was too close, and and I'm getting better about calling that out. Like, I don't mean to be rude. I apologize if you think I'm rude to you, but like, you're really bringing me down right now. Like, stop talking to me, because you're not talking to me about the important things. And that's what would be nice about having somebody with me to run that interference, keep them away. And that's the biggest thing. Like, I understand the value of being in that clean environment. I absolutely understand it. I am, and I know that those guys, those purists, are going to say that I'm about to make a bunch of excuses. But the reality is, I am the incident commander, the operations officer, the staging officer, the side Charlie officer. I'm all of those things until the second and third tiers start to arrive at my incident. And I do not feel comfortable being in my car away from the incident, and like, somebody has to watch the fire. And I don't have a somebody to watch the fire until sometimes much later into the incident. It has to be me. And it's a trade-off. And I fully understand what I'm losing when I go stand out there. But I also think I'm gaining a lot of stuff. But let me back up to before that, when you're talking about the command board. And I should have said this when we were talking about, new guys coming in. You have to break it down into the basics, right? Like, so I keep going back to basics. I created a command sheet that I use for me. I think that some departments use a command sheet that everybody uses the same one. That's fine, whatever. I created a command sheet that I use that works the way my brain works. And it helps guide me through the incident. So I do find myself, sometimes I use it, I lean on it a little bit more heavily than other times. And I think that comes from being comfortable with the environment. But at the same time, I also understand that I am a flawed human being, and I am not necessarily going to remember everything. So I do like to write things down and keep track so that I don't have a guy like a radar from MASH next to me saying, "Hey Chief, you should do this," or "Hey Chief, did you do this?" No, that's on me for quite a long time into this incident. So I think using that checklist, if you've never read the book Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, he is a surgeon that wrote a book about using checklists in everything from architecture and high-rise construction through surgery, and it applies to the fire service. That's a great book. We have to understand that our brains fail us a lot more than when we think they do. But they also are cataloging all of that information, and sometimes the only thing you need is just a little prompt, and it's right back to where it needs to be.
Right.
So I have my command sheet set up to guide me through the incident. I can track things, but it is only meant to last for a certain period, and then we're going to transfer to something else. So transferring to like the case commander, for example, I like that command board. We use the passport accountability system, and we can put those passports up on the top. I have a lot of area where I can write things down on the bottom. It has one thing I don't like about it is, and it's, you can set them up however you want, but on the left-hand side of the bottom board, it has a bunch of like checklist type stuff, and I never use that. I wish that the whole bottom was just blank so I could draw my stuff on there. That ends up being where I put my water bottle, my radio, my clipboard. It's kind of that storage area, but they are fully customizable, so you could do whatever you want with that.
I happen to know a guy. Maybe we can get you.
Yeah, right. Yes,
an upgrade.
So I kind of transfer over. I like to draw out my building, and then I can use the magnets and place the apparatus there. I want to be prepared for the inevitabilities, like, we have to do a par check, or God forbid something happens, we have to do that rapidly, or something as simple as the deputy chief arrives and I'm going to brief him, and I can show him, here's where we've been, here's where we are, this is what we're doing, these are my unmet needs, and go through like that. So I think it's a great anchoring thing for me to be where I need to be, and as soon as I can get somebody there to help me, they kind of take over that, and I like to take a step back and watch the fire more. I would love to have an aide, just to be able to do that. Let them do all the tracking, and I can do all of the watching, and because I want to know ahead of time if we're headed down a path that's, the fire always tells you. I feel like it sets you up, like the information is there, you just got to see it. Yeah. And if you're doing a million other things, you don't always see it.
Well, and I think your point on the checklist, I'm going to read this book. I have it circled and squared on my thing here, because I think back to like when something goes wrong on an airplane and they pull the list out. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a reason why that checklist is there. There's a reason why crew resource management works in the airline industry. And then there's also that ability to, what happened with the Miracle over the Hudson, of, using crew resource management, but being able to jump ahead and making decisions based on experience. So, like, the two kind of work themselves out. But checklists are a huge thing, because, and that's one of the things I've worked out. I've experimented with a couple different incident sheets to try to find out how my non-neurotypical brain operates, because there's some days where I'm like, it's great, we're running on all 6 cylinders, and then it's other days where the timing's just off.
Yeah. And so, I struggle. This is probably the 4th or 5th iteration of this sheet, and then one day I guarantee it'll happen again. I'm just like, I hate this, and I have to rebuild it. Yeah. And I start all over. And most of the time, other people will look at my sheet and be like, no, I can't use that. And that's cool. Then I don't have a problem with that. Make your own. But I think that, I'm sure there's plenty of incident commanders who have many more years of service than I do who might disagree with me. And I mean no disrespect to them, but the human brain is a fantastic machine, and at the same time, there's some shortcomings. And I am not comfortable risking the lives of other people on whether those shortcomings will come into play or not. So I want a backup system. I'm fully capable of running a fire without a command sheet. I just don't think it's the best way to do business. And I don't think it's the best way to do business because I have to give everybody a reasonable expectation that we're going to run a tight ship and everybody gets to go home. And, there's plenty of reasons why that may not happen. I don't want to be one of them.
Right. What does the mental preparation look like before a shift to make sure that you're ready?
So I go through a process that I call it like shifting gears, right? Because when I'm at home, I want to be at home. And when I'm at the firehouse, I want to be at the firehouse. Mm-hmm. So I have a half-hour drive from my house to the firehouse. And one of the first things I do, the 2 nights before I go into work, I try to make sure that I get at least 8 hours of sleep. It just makes me getting up in the morning better. Like I'm getting really diligent about my sleep. Like I want to get good sleep.
That's huge.
So yeah. So the nights before so we work 2 days on, 2 days off, and then we have 4 days off. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. 2 days, 2 nights, 4 days off. So on my 4 days off, those 2 nights, I'll start from when we get off work. Like when we get off work, that first day that we're off, I make 0 plans. I let that day play out the way it plays out. If that means that I want to sit on the couch and watch TV and be a slug, then that's what I do. If I feel like I can get some stuff done or whatever, I'll, knock out the million things that I have to do. But I just let that day play out however it plays out. And then the rest of the 4 days off, I'll schedule things and I'll, go through my list of to-dos and whatever. But those 2 nights before my first day, I really try to get 8 hours of sleep just so I'm in a good rhythm. And then that morning I get up and I always listen to something such as National Fire Radio on the way to work, right? It's always a fire podcast or fire book that I listen to because I want my mind thinking the way I should be thinking at the firehouse. I'm shifting gears from at home Brian to at the firehouse Brian. And so I'll listen to a podcast, and then I have the same routine that I go through in the morning. I come in, I check the schedule for the day, I make my personnel roster, print that out, and I get all of that done. And then I get a cup of coffee, and I go out to shift change. And that's my same process. And then at the end of the day, I want to reshift that gear. So I like to work out at the end of the day. So I kind of start to just burn off that excess energy or whatever. And when I say workout, I have to be honest, it's just running on the treadmill.
Right.
So I run on the treadmill, or maybe I'll row, but typically I run on the treadmill. I like to do that right at the end of the day. And then I'll do shift change and get in the truck, and I'll put on a podcast or a book that has nothing to do with the fire service whatsoever. I like history. I like, a lot of things like that. And there's a ton of great podcasts that I listen to, but I want to now leave the firehouse at the firehouse and be ready to be at home. So that's kind of my mental process.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I'm also looking at everybody else, like in the morning or at the beginning of the shift. I'm kind of sizing everybody up to see where everybody's at. And listen, I've come in and been in a bad mood. Like I've had those days where I'm sure somebody was like, "Uh-oh, stay clear of him today." I try not to do that. I try to be in a good mood and have a positive attitude. Like I'm carrying the banner for this whole operation, right? Like, so I try to set that example, but let's be honest, there's days when that doesn't happen. But at the same time, I am also kind of sizing everybody else up and seeing, are they interactive? Are they just, what's wrong? And maybe I'll talk to one of the, like, hey, you good today? Or what's happening? And maybe they'll tell me, maybe they won't, or maybe that's enough to get them jump started or whatever. So that's pretty much it.
And I just want to kind of, I can't believe we've been going for over an hour here, but if you could pass on one piece of mindset advice to the next generation of firefighters and officers, what would it be, and how would you want to be remembered in Harrisburg?
Wow, those are not easy questions. If I think for firefighters, it's a two-part answer. I know you asked me for one thing, but it's a two-part answer. Show up and do the work and enjoy every second of it. Show up and do the work is, you swore an oath. You stepped out from normal society and said, I'm going to do this for you. And that's super, super important. And in order to live up to you swearing that oath, you have to put in effort. So I think show up and do the work is all encompassing. That's being physically, mentally ready, understanding building construction, understanding fire behavior, being good at the task level skill sets, all of that. Show up and make sure that you're doing the work to be who you want to be on the fire ground and in the firehouse. And then enjoy it, because you're not working a regular job. And as I get closer to retirement, I am fully aware that I'm going to really miss this job. And I'm not looking to retire and then go work a job that makes me work harder than what I have here.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't have a lot of experience in working that kind of job either, because I haven't looked at this as a job. I get to live out my childhood fantasy. I get to go screaming through town on a fire truck and go to fires and break shit, and like, it's fun. and I know that that's attached to loss and trauma and all of that, and I acknowledge that my grandparents lost their house to a fire. I'm very well schooled on what that means, but if you're a firefighter, you also understand what I mean when I say this is awesome. So,
Yeah.
and one day I'm not going to get to do that anymore, and I'm just trying to enjoy it and remember it, and my legacy at Harrisburg Bureau of Fire. I I hope that it's that I cared about the city and the people, and I cared about our job, and I cared about the people that I do the job with, and that I just I wanted to leave it better than we found it.
I think you're doing just that, Brian, and I cannot thank you enough for sitting down with me today to talk about all these things that we went over. This has been fantastic. I really, I mean, this is, for me, and I'm not trying to pump you up here. This has been a masterclass in leadership, and I appreciate that. So thank you for sharing this with all of us today on Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. So,
well, I appreciate the opportunity. I know I tend to talk a lot and run on, but I have a lot of stuff that I want to say, because I think that it's important for us to pass it on, because we can make it better by sharing what we've learned the hard way, and I think it's super important that we do that. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, Brian, where can people find you at if they wanted to seek you out on social media or something like that?
So all my social media is just my name, Brian Bastinelli. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I'm going to be redoing my YouTube page a little bit, but it's just my name. Facebook Messenger is the worst place to get a hold of me. So
Yeah.
Try Instagram. That's probably your best bet.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on today. Just hang out for a minute as we do the outro. This is Rob from Frontline Mindset, today with Battalion Chief Brian Bastinelli from the Harrisburg Bureau of Fire. This has been a fantastic podcast. We've had everything from his opening and origin stories to lessons from the backstep to the promotion mindset and his command mindset at the fires, and how using videos has been a tool for him. Just thank you so much. We will see you guys in the next one. This is Rob, Frontline Mindset. We'll catch you later.
National Fire Radio.